this is apropos. Well, as the Israeli military pushes on with its bombardment of Gaza, dozens more people have been killed, including at least 20 people in an attack that set ablaze tents sheltering displaced families in a crowded camp. It came as rights group Amnesty International released a report saying that Israel's actions in Gaza met the definition of the crime of genocide. Accusations strongly rejected by Israel. Della has the details.
A damning report which casts the state of Israel in a negative light. Amnesty International has accused Israeli authorities of carrying out genocide against Palestinians based on evidence and statements made by officials, a pattern of conduct the rights group says cannot be explained by recklessness.
Israel intended and intend to commit genocide. It may do so alongside its military objective. It may do so in addition to obliterate or get rid of Hamas. We looked at the cumulative effect of these acts, one after the other. We looked at the incredible impact of Israel's crimes over the last 14 months.
The assessment from the London-based human rights organization, which came after months of analysis, was welcomed by Palestinian officials. And on the ground in Gaza, residents said it served as proof the war was more than a fight with Hamas.
This is a war of extermination. It's not a war on Hamas. This is a war of extermination against the entire Palestinian population. That's clear. What have we done? What have our neighbors done to deserve this? They're all civilians. They all have children.
Israeli officials have slammed Amnesty's findings, calling them deplorable and entirely fabricated. The country alleging it's defending itself in accordance with international law. Amnesty International is calling on states who support the ICC's arrest warrant on Russian President Vladimir Putin to do the same for Benjamin Netanyahu, arguing double standards cannot exist in the implementation of justice.
Well, to discuss the ever-worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we're joined by Tommaso, Della, Longa, spokesperson with the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Thank you so much for being with us on the programme this evening. Before we turn to what's happening in Gaza, to the wider context there, another one of your volunteers was killed yesterday in the Gaza Strip. A paramedic shot dead after returning from transporting patients for treatment. How difficult is it for those who are risking their lives to help people there?
Thanks a lot for having me for this important question. It's almost impossible to work in the context of the Gaza Strip, and sadly, the numbers of women and men of Palestine Red Crescent lost their life since the beginning of the conflict is telling us this story. Since the beginning of the conflict, we lost 23 colleagues of Palestine Red Crescent, 6 of Magen David Adom in Israel, and this is a clear reminder of a conflict that is not even respecting humanitarian workers.
And Tommaso, today it's also International Volunteer Day, a moment really to come together to call for the protection of all volunteers. But it seems that that message isn't getting through when it comes to what's happening on the ground in Gaza.
Indeed, I mean, I cannot avoid to say that the level of frustration in the humanitarian community is growing day after day when we are witnessing what is going on in Gaza, but would also other contexts like Sudan, for example. Just to give you an idea, this is the worst year, deadliest year on the record in terms of humanitarian workers. 281 humanitarian workers killed in 1 year. 32 of those are Red Cross or Crescent volunteers, the biggest number in Palestine and in Sudan. And I think that today it's very important to recall all the governments, all the parties, every stakeholder to do their utmost to respect civilians, to protect civilians. Humanitarian workers is not only a moral obligation, but it's a legal obligation under international humanitarian law.
And how much aid is actually at this point getting through to Gaza? We're hearing that, you know, in terms of humanitarian getting aid, it's been essentially completely blocked off for 2 months now. So where is the aid getting to, and how much is getting into people who desperately need it in Gaza?
Aid is basically not entering or trickling in here and there, but it's less, way less that drop in the ocean. We were using the words drop in the ocean 6 months ago, when the Rafah border was still open, the border between Gaza and Egypt, and this is not anymore the case. And just to give you again a number, 96% of the people in Gaza don't receive enough food. Starvation will be basically inevitable if we're not able to scale up humanitarian assistance, if we're not able to get more aid in. But to do that, we need to have safe and indirect access. To do that, we need to have an agreement to scale up humanitarian operation. And sadly, it's not what we are seeing at the moment in the Gaza Strip.
And how do you believe the international community can put pressure on Israel to allow more aid into Gaza? And why has this not been happening? As you say yourself, we've been speaking about this for at least 6 months now.
This is a very good question. Of course, the international community, diplomatic community, has different tools in terms of putting pressure on the different parties. It's clear that dialogue maybe it's lacking, but even more than dialogue is the decision-making process. And also, I would say to put humanity first in every kind of discussion on the Gaza Strip. What we need to remember all the time, that after 13 months of this horrific, awful conflict, there are families who are still waiting their beloved at home. I'm talking about the families of the hostages. There are families who are not able to give food to their kids, and I'm talking about the families in northern Gaza, in Gaza City, and so on. So I think that, again, we need to put at the center humanity, human beings, respect for all of them. But the reality here is that there is not any more time. Winter, again, is at the door of the Gaza Strip. A few days ago, there was heavy rain, and areas of Gaza were completely destroyed basically by the flooding, and again Palestinians lost everything. So there is a need of action, and there is a need of action now. And again, frustration is really high because we are seeing the suffering, we are seeing the normalization of the suffering in the Gaza Strip, but we are not seeing action.
And Amnesty today, another big story, Amnesty accusing for the first time Israel of genocide. What is the Red Cross view when it comes to that? What do your volunteers see when they're on the ground in Gaza?
You know, of course, we do respect the work of other organizations, of human rights organizations. Then, of course, our mandate is different, and we don't want to be caught in the middle of, let's say, discussion among organizations, governments, and so on. Because at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is to get access and to reach the people who need mostly everything at the moment in the Gaza Strip. What I can tell you, though, is the stories, the horrific stories of the volunteers of the Palestine Red Crescent, who are basically doing their utmost till now. We're talking about almost 1,500 women and men who are still incredibly working after 13 months with very limited capacity. But their stories are horrific. They are themselves affected by the conflict. They are themselves living in tents without running water. They themselves lost their beloved, but they are still working in an impossible context. And I have to admit that the thing that makes us more sad and frustrated is the lack of respect of international laws. There is an erosion of this respect that, of course, is creating huge problems on the operation in the Gaza Strip.
And Tommaso, we talk a lot about the number of people who are dying in Gaza. Of course, hundreds of thousands also very badly wounded. The WHO says more than 20,000 children. What is the implication for them? How is care getting to these people who have been so badly wounded when so many hospitals, so many of them are just simply not functioning at this point?
The implication is basically the difference between life and death for many. But I would also not only refer to the wounded, which of course are an incredible number and they need to be treated and they don't have access to health. But here we are talking about lack of any basic in terms of health. So, I mean, I'm a father. And during the flu season, my kid has to take antibiotics. Without those antibiotics, probably would have been a complication. Well, in Gaza, there is no antibiotics. There is no basics for children, for pregnant women, for people with health conditions, thinking about chemotherapy or people with diabetes. And of course, this is impacting heavily the entire society. And this will have an impact for I would say years, probably decades to come in terms of health, in terms of access to water, in terms of access to food. And this is absolutely unacceptable and horrific.
And what is the international community doing in terms of helping to get patients who badly need treatment out of Gaza?
Thanks for this question. This is exactly staying in the same box of the discussion we were having before in terms of dialogue and lack of actions. We have been talking about safe access. We have been talking about evacuation of patients. We have been talking of protection of civilians and humanitarian workers. We have been talking of the release of all hostages, but we are not seeing any action in the Gaza Strip. We're not seeing any next step on the situation in the Gaza Strip. And of course, this is very sad. Now, of course, there is still, till the moment that there is still some discussions, there is still some hope. I need to stay optimistic, but I would say that, again, the level of frustration is very high, and the people in the Gaza Strip don't have any more time to wait, even more the wounded or the people who need treatment and should be evacuated immediately.
Okay, Tommaso, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you so much for your time on the programme this evening. That is Tommaso Della Longa, spokesperson with the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Well, that's it from us.